So Apple has just released its shiny new iPhone 7, and it's an absolute monster. So what better way to test it than to pitch it against the current reigning champion of gaming smartphones, the S7 Edge. So for the first time ever, Apple has finally included a quad-core chip, and we've got that backed up by 2GB of RAM and a 6-core GPU. Flipping over to the S7 Edge, we've got the Exynos 8890, which is an octa-core CPU with 4GB of RAM and a 12-core GPU. So how does that translate to gaming? So we'll start the test off with Unkilled, which is one of the most graphically demanding games on either platform. And I have to say, you can probably tell yourself, it's running great on both. It's not quite a smooth 60 frames per second, but we'll put that down to poorer optimization rather than the phone's performance, because even weaker phones can achieve the same thing. But the first thing you're probably going to notice, more important than anything, is the screens. While the iPhone 7 has a 4.7-inch IPS LCD panel, which has improved colours and is a great display in its own right, the S7 Edge has a 5.5-inch Quad HD Super AMOLED panel. So yeah, there are going to be people on either side of the fence. Some people prefer a more natural look, others a more saturated look, but in my opinion, the S7 Edge trumps the iPhone 7 any day. Not only is there a higher resolution, but also a higher pixel density, the colours are more saturated, and the fact that it extends to the edges gives you a much more immersive feel. The iPhone 7 has a really bad screen-to-body ratio. For the most part, Asphalt 8 Airborne runs perfectly on both phones, but every now and again the Android version will slow down a little bit. Now that could be due to poor optimization or the phone itself, but either way the iPhone experience is slightly more consistent. On top of that, the iPhone's tilt receptors are actually more responsive for the same settings. And then we have speakers. And there is just no competition here. The iPhone 7 wipes the floor with the Galaxy S7 Edge. The sound is fuller, has far more bass, and is even louder. On top of that, the iPhone has stereo sound, and it has 3 speakers as opposed to the Galaxy S7's 1. So moving over to Modern Combat 5. The game is locked at 60 frames per second on both phones, so it makes for an awesome gaming experience. Now on this game especially, you should be able to tell the S7 Edge has a slightly red tint to the screen, and the iPhone is siding more on a yellow tint. Obviously, you only really notice when they're held next to each other, but just something to bear in mind. Now what I did find is that as well as being more immersive, as well as being able to better see what's going on, the larger screen of the S7 just meant you can control the phone better. I was much more able to aim my guns, I was much more able to run around to where exactly I wanted to, and that's just another convenience of having the larger display. In terms of how the phones feel in the hand, well obviously the S7 Edge being the slightly larger one is a little bit harder to sort of make your way around with one hand, but hopefully when you're gaming you won't need to do that. But the edges on it are a bit harsher, the iPhone 7 cups much nicer in the hands, it's just a lot smoother, it feels like a pebble. Moving on to Injustice, yet again both phones slice through the game with no problems, and this is a trend you will start to see as you use either one of these smartphones. In their respective fields they are top of the line, and if any game poses a problem to these phones, then it will pose a problem to any phones. Having said that, those slight pauses you tend to get in Android games every now and again, no matter how powerful the phone, just don't happen on the iPhone. Whether you're in the middle of a combat and you just tap the pause button, on the Android phone it might freeze, but on the iPhone it stays silky smooth consistently. Now no matter how hard you push the Galaxy S7 Edge, having a rear plastic body means that it stays cool as a cucumber. But the iPhone 7 can get a tiny bit hot. You're not exactly going to be able to cook an egg on it, but it does get noticeably warmer. So I also thought it would be worth testing Pokemon Go. Not because it's a particularly demanding game, but just because so many of you guys play it. So Pokemon Go runs slightly better on the iPhone. There's not too much difference between it, either way it's a poorly made game, there's no doubt about it. But every now and again the iPhone one will just outdo the Android will freeze up a little bit or become a little bit more unresponsive. Which does happen on the iPhone too, but it's just more frequent on the Samsung. So guys, thanks a lot for watching, I really appreciate it. I hope that clears up any sort of issues or concerns you had with the iPhone 7 and its performance, and generally speaking, there aren't any. The iPhone 7 flies through everything I've thrown at it. I'll do some more thorough tests and a full review will come up pretty shortly, so make sure you stay tuned for that. I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.